Hello and welcome to another episode of Work 2.0, the podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wells, and today we're talking about, again, as usual, all things AI, leadership, and the future of work. Today, I'm joined by Jaymie Pottinger. He is the head of Pottinger and Associates. He is a leadership consultant, author, and coach. And I decided to invite him on the show today because he's recently authored and released a book called The Face of Leadership. It's now in Barnes and Noble. And he's just come recently from his book tour, and I'm delighted to have him on the show today to discuss his book. It's very, very relevant given our focus on the future of work today. Jaymie, really happy, pleased to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure being here with you, hearing the voice and the topic. I'm inspired by your words and the persons you have had on your podcast thus far. And I'm looking forward to having an exciting conversation as we not only address the book, but address the AI version of life that we're now living in.
For sure, for sure. So let's definitely get into it. First of all, tell me about your vision for the book. What inspired you to write The Face of Leadership?
Wow. That's a great question. When I think about the face of leadership, I recognize that we've been going through an era where everything is like a cookie cutter approach when it comes down to how we manage ourselves, how we manage people, how we manage processes. And I recognize that a number of leaders, instead of leading their teams, they're having persons who are remaining in a stagnant position as opposed to growing because they're not adapting, they're not adjusting, they're not changing. And then you have some folks who have the skill set, but because they have had certain experiences, they think that they're not leaders. So when I thought about that, I'm like, people have a cookie cutter script approach or picture of what the perfect leader looks like. So when I started my research and looked through leaders and great leaders, I recognized that great leaders, they're not really fitting into what we consider to be great folks, but because they experience certain things, and based on their experiences, they found themselves in positions whereby their backs were against the wall and they had to make decisions that revolutionized the way that they do things. And in an instant, the people who were not viewing them as leaders were now at their feet looking for them to guide them along the right path.
Wow.
So the face of leadership is really a framework that tells you that regardless of where you are a leader, because leadership is leading up, it's leading down, it's leading across, and most importantly, it's leading yourself.
That's amazing. I came across a quote today which said that basically to be number one, you've got to be odd to be number one, right? An odd number. It's very catchy, but it's so true. Like to be number one in your fields and as a leader, to stand, if you want to stand out, you really have got to stand out and be a bit weird and innovative and odd. So I really love that concept. So what have you observed as you were researching for the book? You know, the months, some of you said you mentioned, was it 4 months that it took you researching, 5 months?
So about 5 months in terms of research, and I say
Right.
research and writing, I would say it took me between 8 and 9 months in terms of those pieces.
So during those months that you were researching, what have you observed from your research that are the common pitfalls that leaders face today?
I think some of the common pitfalls that leaders are making, and I find that even with some of the companies that I'm consulting with and leaders, is that they are so fixed on the popular opinion, they allow the popular opinion to relegate them into antiquity. So instead of, as you made mention, standing up and following their vision and being strategic and being agile, they're fixed in what was, and they're not prepared for what is to come. And as a result of that, they're not securing the kind of results that they need. And they're fixed in that box. And most times when I speak to leaders, or even when I did my research, I recognize that it's not a shortage of ideas. It's not a shortage of perspective. It's a shortage of the willpower, the guts, and the confidence to act on those things and do things differently, so that not only are you in the same position, but you're leading and inspiring others to create the kind of results and the impact that they need to have. And I think those are some of the things. It was frightening because I was seeing folks or leaders who are persons who are in certain positions and serving in certain capacity, whereby their level or their results were below par, not because they're not capable, but because they were unwilling to venture into the unknown. And I call it the rocking chair mindset, whereby they're fixed in being comfortable, sucking their thumb, doing what is regular, and just thinking about who they could be. And so fixed on where they're coming from, they miss out on the opportunity of stepping into the unknown and doing things that they have never done before. And it's not that they don't have ideas, it's just that they're fearful of doing that. And my research showed me that leaders who are successful are the ones who are willing to take the road that quite few have taken in the past, and they were willing to bear the bruises, the scars, and the experience. Because in my research, it showed that the leaders who experienced failures along that path found their failure to be the birthplace for their greatness. And
Right.
that was something that inspired me when you looked at how leaders are going about it now, whereby many of our leaders are fixed as opposed to being more fluid and moving forward and taking on new ideas, new opinions, and making different decisions.
That's ultimately what drives innovation, isn't it?
Yeah.
You often hear people say, oh, and you hear this a lot in organizations. I'm sure you've come across this in your consulting work. This is the way things have always been done, right? And you hear that a lot. And whether people verbally say it or they indirectly say it, it's just a common sentiment that you just know. Even in my old workplace, that was just something that was an unspoken sentiment. But it's like they're very resistant, and senior leadership been talking about being very resistant to change management, being very resistant to innovation. And this is not because it's the way things have always been done, doesn't mean that it's right in this particular, in 2025, 2026. And sticking with that mindset definitely freezes us and holds us back from our potential professionally in our own professions, but also from a business standpoint, for sure. You end up falling behind your competitors that way. So you talk about the FACE framework in your the Face of Leadership. It's an acronym, right? FACE.
Hmm.
Can you walk us through what that is, and how does that work in 2026, being as we're
Wow.
moving into the new year soon?
So the FACE framework, the first F stands for failure. The second F is for foresight. The A is for awareness. The second A is for agility. The C is for confidence, and the next C is for clarity. And the E stands for energy and execution. And I've had some of the pundits first when they saw the book, they were like, "Why would you start it with failure?" And I said, because that's the place that we're so much afraid of, and
Mm,
because of that fear, it holds us back. But part of leadership is learning how to fail and use those experiences to serve as the springboard in terms of us doing great things. And you
wow.
recognize that there's no victory without scars, and great leaders have scars because they have failed, and failure is what has taught them the greatest lessons as they move forward. So you
Mm.
think about it that, I normally say this sometimes to leaders or in my consulting or speaking practice. I'm like, could you imagine if a mother held back her daughter from walking and say, God, you're so cute crawling? Then you'd have adults crawling around in the world because they would not have made that step. And
Right?
that's life. But what happens as soon as we start walking, we forget that we have the capacity to fly, and we end up remaining in the valley because we want to do what we're comfortable with. And
Wow.
it's not that we're created that way, it's because we think that if we venture into new areas, we run the risk of losing relevance. But what we
Mm,
fail to recognize is that it's not that we're losing relevance, is that we are now losing traction of where the world is heading, because we have held ourselves back in terms of moving forward. So failure.
right.
And then foresight is that just being able to see beyond, because strategic foresight today demands agility, and it's an ongoing process of not just sensing and learning and adapting, but rather it's all about the long-term plans that some of us are held hostage to. And as I've
Mm,
heard you on your talk, on your show before, that with AI and automation and changes are accelerating, leaders must take the step towards prioritizing not just scenario planning, but also scenario thinking and the rapid experimentation ahead of what's happening, because you have to be willing to create a disruption in what is comfortable so that you can be prepared when the discomfort comes. So it's less about
right.
predicting the future, and I would say that it's more about building the capacity to deal with multiple differences that the future will bring to you as a leader, as an organization, or as a team.
Wow, wow. That's really inspiring. When you think about the great leaders of our time, you think about great entrepreneurs, great founders, startup founders, they've had to face several failures. You think about the story of the lady who founded Canva, Melanie Perkins, how many no's she received, or how many apparent failures before she got a yes, which led to one of the world's most successful startups. Canva, everyone uses Canva,
Mhm.
right? And then you think about even Amazon, the founder Jeff Bezos, how many failures, how many no's did he get before he got a yes? And ultimately that shaped how they are as leaders today. And Canva and Amazon are two like publicly traded organizations,
Yeah. Mhm.
hugely successful, multi-billion-dollar companies. because those leaders learn to fail and they pass that culture onto their teams. So you've definitely got a really good point there. I love that you started that framework with failure. And it's actually interestingly something that I've written about in my Forbes articles about learning from your mistakes and actually reframing them. It's not mistakes, it's lessons learned, it's experience, I love that. So you talk about agility in that framework and bouncing back from failure, right? So with AI reshaping roles, reshaping industries and workplaces, what does agile, resilient leadership look like today, practically?
I believe that one of the things in the book we talk about that quitters bounce, but winners bounce back and follow through. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And a man without a vision needs supervision. And not because you're on the right highway mean that you're heading in the right direction. And that's where we are. That's where we are as a society. But resilient, agile leadership today is really rooted in, I would say, curiosity, adaptability, and emotional intelligence. And leaders must learn as fast as technology evolves, because you can't stay stagnant. And practically this really means creating a feedback rich environment when it comes down to leadership, and also embracing experimentation over perfection, because sometimes we're so fixed in wanting it to be perfect, we rob others of giving us the feedback that is needed for us to take ourselves to the next level. And I want to say that when we foster this, what it does, it empowers others to share with us, and we give others the autonomy to think as leaders, as opposed to thinking that they have to only think the way that we think. But I'll even say that the most effective leaders balance technology, the fluency of technology, with a human, I would say, human-centered mindset, while ensuring that innovation serves both people, and it also serves a purpose. Because you have to understand that your purpose is the compass that drives you to the success and the results that you need. So regardless of the technology that you're using, you must be sure that it's aligned with the root process or purpose that you have, so that at the end of the day, those who you're serving can be satisfied. Because not because you have a machine that can make an extra arm, I need an extra leg. So I don't need to purchase a machine that is making arms, right? So I
find that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, it's just funny you said that. I was just thinking that when it comes to AI, for example, I was at the Asana's Work Innovation Summit a few weeks ago, and one of the things that they were talking about is how a lot of business leaders are just applying AI all over the place, kind of, just because it's the hottest thing, it's a hype. So, let's use AI here and AI there, and it's not effective, and they're wasting a lot of time and draining their resources, draining their productivity. And what you're saying is, it's not this matter of applying it just because, it's a matter of really applying it where it matters. And okay, does this connect to your values? Does this connect to your overall mission?
And as you say that, if you think about it this way, you're Rachel and I'm Jaymie. There's some differences in our voice, or a lot of differences that we have. What happens is that many leaders, because they have adapted the cookie cutter approach, they rob themselves and their organization and their team of their unique impact, because they're just going with the bandwagon, as you're making mention. Now, if you identify your purpose, if you identify your purpose, if you identify the people that you're looking to serve, then you will now know exactly what AI tools you need to create a relationship with that could take you to the next level. But if you're looking at the tool before looking at your purpose, then you may have the wrong tool giving you the wrong results, and you'll be left in a place whereby your team would not be satisfied, and your customers, the people who you're serving, will be wondering, what on earth are you giving to us? And you can't afford to do that.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And moving on to self-awareness, I know that's obviously one of the things you talk about in your book. Self-awareness is definitely like a number one skill, I'd say, for leaders, because that's all part of emotional intelligence. And how can you even progress in your own leadership development if you're not self-aware? And can you share with the audience, what do you think are like one or two best practices for leaders to develop self-awareness?
I think for leaders, leaders should always look to develop self-awareness, and it begins with intentional reflection, meaning that leaders should always create a circle of trusted folks who could be honest with them, folks who are not in it to rob them, but folks who are in it to uplift them. difference. Rob as opposed to uplift them. And people who are about to uplift you, they'll share the truth with you. They'll remind you of where you're coming from. They'll show up your strengths and your weaknesses, and they'll hold you accountable. You see, leaders must regularly pause to assess how their values and their emotions and those things and their biases are impacting the way that they lead. Because what drives you defines you. And you ask yourself the question, if I should ask a member of my team to define me, would I really like the adjective that they have littered in that description of who I am? So,
Right.
so having a sense of awareness drives the level of results that you secure, and it also gives you the pinpoints in terms of what you need to work on as an individual, and exactly tells you where you are. And when it comes down to organization, because as leaders, it's not just it's important for you to be aware of where you are as an individual, but it's also important for you to have organizational awareness, because as leaders, as you grow actively, you need to know what is the purpose of this organization. Are we hitting those marks? What are the
Right.
reasons why we're not hitting the mark? Can we go further? Are we sitting on a plateau? What are we doing? And I say two best practices is really that 360-degree feedback.
Right.
Doing those, for us at Partners and Associates, we do the predictive index in terms of having leaders go through that, whereby they get that scientific response in terms of where they are. And I normally ask leaders, who are your 5 closest persons, and have them give you a list of your strengths and your weaknesses, and share that list, and let's dissect that list and ask yourself the question, how are these things that are listed currently impacting my level of productivity? Are these things leading me closer to my goals, or are they pulling me away from them? And the responses from those questions will certainly guide you in terms of how you plan for the future.
But quick question, because just a final question, but also like a follow-up from that, because that got me thinking. I've been reading, I think it was Harvard Business Review and McKinsey, talk about echo chambers where people feel kind of afraid to tell a leader what's really on their mind. Like, you see company-wide surveys go out, what do you think about the CEO? And generally people will say the positive things, the nice things that every leader wants to hear. How do leaders get their teams and get those close to them to tell them the truth, the
Wow.
constructive truth?
It starts first with creating that culture. If you create a culture, an iron fist culture, then folks will give you iron fist like cultural responses, because it means that it's out of fear that they're giving you feedback.
Right.
But when you have a culture whereby feedback is an ongoing, and I don't even use the word feedback anymore, I say feed forward, whereby
I've heard
folks
that,
are
yeah.
they're open to give feedback at any given time, and it's not just based on your given setting. Once you
Right.
notice or recognize something that serves to prohibit or prevent someone from getting to the next level. So what some leaders do, like I have some leaders who I'm coaching at this point, or leaders who we're consulting with, and what they have a particular tool that allows members of their team to provide feedback without them even knowing who it's coming from. And then some
Oh.
and then some leaders, what they also do in their regular team meetings, at the end of the week, you have to share 2 glows and 2 grows about the leader. So Rachel, if you want to lie for the first 5 months, I don't know how you're going to do it for 12 months. So,
Right.
so,
After
so,
a while.
so after a while, it's going to become a part whereby, hey, Jaymie, you finished your project, you did a great job, but I must be honest, your attitude robbed this person of an opportunity of being totally transparent, because this person felt as if, as a result of how hard you were on her, she like, you know what, let me just share the good news. And we could have pushed that margin up by 10 more percent,
Right.
but that person
Right.
started shutting down because they're fearful that you may fire them for telling them what is the hard truth. And then I share with leaders that all leaders need a coach, they need a mentor and a motivator, because what happens, these folks can give you the hardcore feedback, and they will help to train you to secure tough feedback from those who you're working with.
Those are some really awesome tips, really awesome tips. The one about the team meetings and the anonymous feedback as well is good. I think it helps to move that. And ultimately, like what you said, not just about moving that barrier, but ultimately creating that culture. If it's something that's the norm, it's like kind of like I think about how my relationship is with my mom. We have a very, very open friendship kind of relationship
Yeah,
where she's very, very honest and open with me about things she doesn't even need to be honest about because I'm her daughter. But she will tell me things about her life and just be very vulnerable, just so that she can show me that she's relating to me, and just so that she can show me that she's not perfect, she's not on a pedestal. And I respect her for that, because I see that, and it makes me naturally want to open up and share
Mhm.
secrets and things that I would have otherwise kept from her. So in the same way as a parent does that, when leaders can do that, when they model that, naturally it will get the employees to open up, because like you said, that culture has been created. It's not just a one-time survey, you
And
know.
I think one of the big things to Rachel is that, what leaders are always looking for, they're always looking for discretionary value. People go the
Right,
extra mile. But
right.
people only go the extra mile if they trust that you trust what they know.
Mm,
And if and
exactly.
if they and if they don't feel that sense of safety in terms of sharing, then they're going to give you the bare minimum, because they can't afford to share anything with you that would potentially jeopardize their position. But if they
Right.
but if they know that you have that core belief that their position is not dependent on them telling the truth, but their honesty is what you value the most, then they will use it as an automatic step to, hey, once they have an idea or once they have feedback, they will share that feedback with you.
Wow, amazing. So where can people find your book, The Face of Leadership?
You could find The Face of Leadership on Amazon. You could find it in Barnes and Noble, and you could find it on what's that thing that you could read books?
Kindle?
Kindle, yeah. You could find it on those platforms. So yeah, you could find it there.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jaymie, for your time. And for those of you watching or listening, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Substack, wherever you're tuning in, if you want to know more about the future of work so you can prepare yourself and your teams for what's ahead in 2026 and beyond, feel free to like this episode, comment under this episode, share it with your co-workers, with your boss, with your team, with your friends. Give this show a good rating and keep following us, because every Monday I'll be pumping out new episodes, interviewing other thought leaders, CEOs, investors, millionaires, people who are at the cutting edge of the future of work, and people like Jaymie who have all these insights and research. And there's much more of that coming on along down the line. So I will see you next Monday on Work 2.0, the podcast.